Welcome to the Deep Leadership Podcast. Today I'm joined by Brian Kreeger. Brian is an author, speaker, and nonprofit consultant. He's also the author of a new book called The Courageous Ask, a proactive approach to prevent the fall of Christian nonprofit leaders. In this book, he shares his own personal experiences as a nonprofit founder to help other leaders deal with the pressures and struggles of being in the leadership spotlight. I'm excited to have him on the show to talk about this. So, Brian, welcome.
Hey, thank you, John. I appreciate you having me on your podcast. And man, I love your stuff. So I'm just so honored to be on here. So thank you so much.
Well, the honor is mine. I'm really excited. You got a new book out. I really want to talk about it because I think this is something we don't talk about enough, and certainly we haven't covered on this podcast. Is that being in as a leader, being in the spotlight, it's a tough place to be, and everybody wants to be the leader until it's time to do leadership stuff. And part of leadership stuff is being alone and trying to lead this whole organization. And sometimes that's tough. And I've faced a lot of the same challenges that I've seen in your book. And I know a lot of the leaders who are listening in have as well. So I think this is going to be really a powerful discussion.
All right. Well, thank you. I think obviously it's a very important thing. Leadership falls are happening all around us. Doesn't matter if it's necessarily in the Christian nonprofit world or pastors or preachers or priests or whatever, or in the corporate world. This is happening, and sometimes on a national level, sometimes where it's most damaging is just in our local areas that impacts people on much personal level.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen it time after time. So let's get into it. I mean, you wrote the book for a reason. Can you tell us a little bit about the origin story, and then about why this book came to be and what you're trying to get done with this book? What's the real purpose of getting this book out there?
Well, I spent my life in kind of a corporate world. Frankly, I ran grocery stores for 28 years. That was my main career, and then I was called to do something a little bit different. And it's quite a story. Whoever picks up the book is going to be able to read it. But I ended up being called to open a free clinic in our city. It's your typical city that most of us have seen, poverty stricken in some areas, and just the struggles. Could be a study on any urban environment right in our city. So decided to open up a free clinic, which a lot of people say, hey, that doesn't really make sense. You ran grocery stores for all those years. But anyway, that's what I was called to do. So that's what we did. Well, about 4 years in, we had served probably, I think we were at about 1,000 people. Like 3,000 visits. We had 15 medical providers that were volunteering with us, and probably about 40 other volunteers, nurses, and staff and such. And I came across this period in life where I was struggling. And to be quite honest, I had a 3-month emotional affair. I fell. I was one of those leaders that fell. And of course, that's a lifelong thing. The effects and the collateral damage of that will last for the rest of my life. So I'm sitting there and I'm talking to my board and I'm telling them what happened. This is my first meeting telling them this is what happened. And one of the board members looks at me and says, Brian, what effect or what role did our organization play in what you described to us here today? I had no answer.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking from that angle at all. I was just thinking, hey, I blew it. Believe me, I'm a master of individual accountability, and I just figured I blew it. But he brought up something that I had not thought about.
Right.
So that kind of started me down a road. I had to deal with, as I said, all the damage that was done from the fall. But that stuck in my mind. What role did they play? I never would blame them for it. So that's not even an issue here. But there was a role, and there are inherent struggles and stumbling blocks in leadership that can take us to a point where we become vulnerable.
Mm,
So what are we doing about it? What can we do about it? Are we being proactive about it? Or are we just going to watch the fall happen?
yeah.
So that took me down this road, and it's a couple of years later, more than a couple of years later, a number of years later, and this became the book. The book became the culmination of all those thoughts over those years.
Mm. Well, when I read your story, I just, I definitely felt it personally, right? Um, Being a leader, especially a leader of a startup company where, you have a small team, it's you against the world. And it is it's a very lonely place to be, right? So a lot of times the pains, the struggles, the things that you face, there's really no one to talk to. There's no one, like, you don't want to show necessarily to your employees that you're worried or you're concerned or you have reservations. And then when you're talking to, in your case, potential donors, or in my case, potential customers or investors, I I'm always, everything's great. Let me tell you about my business and how great it is,
Uh,
right? So you're always putting
right.
on a face about how everything is wonderful. But really, in a lot of ways, you're playing with your mind is saying another thing, and you're acting a different way, right? And I think there's some struggles there, and I don't think people realize that that struggle is real with leaders. Is that you're you've got the reality of what you're facing, and then you have what you're trying to portray to the rest of the world.
Yeah, I like to say that to other people, it's like this abstract. We know
Yeah.
our leaders are not human, but
Mm,
that's abstract. That that is kind of just some idea they have built in their mind. The thing is, leaders are not perfect,
yeah.
and that's okay to everybody around them until they prove it.
Right. Right.
Once they prove it, it's a whole different ball game. So
Yeah.
that's why it's an abstract idea in the minds of most people around the leaders. Whoever, it could be customers, it could be a corporate board, it could be your own board, or heck, for a pastor, it could be a congregation.
Right.
So it's okay for them to be perfect and be human, or be imperfect and be
Right.
human,
Right.
until they prove it. So
Right. Right.
my
Until
thoughts are,
something.
let's get out in front of it.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. As you think back, and like I said, your story resonated with me. What are some of the common challenges that leaders face that maybe don't get talked about too much in terms of, the struggles of being the one person in charge of an organization?
Well, you already mentioned the target that you have, that creates pressure. Um, you know, you also mentioned something else. In your mind that you're presenting yourself in kind of a marketing sense.
Right.
Okay, you want to look like you've got the answers, but you also have this other side, and you're always asking yourself, "Am I just crazy? Because everybody else seems to be doing it well." That's
Yeah. Yeah.
that. You know,
Yes.
everybody else seems to and that creates such an incredible pressure because you think everybody else is doing it great.
Yeah.
I had this experience where, this is way back. I was going to quit my company. I was a store manager in a store. So I told them in October that I was leaving at the end of the year. So they took me out of my store. They sent me to other stores to help other store managers during the busy Christmas season. Well, that whole time of leadership in doing, running stores, I was feeling the same loneliness. Like everybody else seems to be doing it great, but
Yeah.
I'm the guy that what's the matter with me? Okay.
Yeah.
I can't
Yeah.
get this under control. But bottom line is I go out to help these other store managers and I saw the same thing.
Yes.
They
Yeah.
had the same
Yeah.
problems.
Yeah.
So I think that is actually one of the keys is being honest and open and vulnerable with other leaders so that we
Yeah.
see each other's struggles.
I
So,
think that's really, really important. I
oh
know.
my gosh,
I know. I
instead
have
of a continual competition.
yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think when you get a chance to be exposed with other leaders' inside thoughts, you realize that we're all feeling the exact same things, right? We're trying to portray everything is great, but we're struggling inside. And I had a friend of mine who runs a business, and uh, 2 years ago, he said, I don't know if you know this, but I'm struggling with depression. And when he talked about it, I'm like, Oh yeah, I've got that too. I didn't realize I did, but I do too. And I thought it was just me. I thought I was just okay. There's something wrong with me. With battling through some of these worries I had. And he was struggling with the same thing. So I think sounds like having someone to be able to talk to and to be able to have those conversations prevents it from turning into a crisis. In other words, solve it early on before it gets out of control, right?
Yeah, I read one time that um, everybody wants to be fully known. I mean, to the
Mhm.
deepest, darkest, ugliest spot of who they are. They want at least one person to know them to that level,
Yeah,
still be loved and accepted.
yeah,
And isn't that what we fear? We fear that somebody's going to see all that stuff in us that is not a marketing ploy. And it's
right.
not super positive, and they're going to reject us.
Yeah,
So that is one of the biggest fears, and that's one of the things that it's not always everybody else's fault. Sometimes it's like you did not open up about your own depression
yeah,
until somebody else said it.
yeah,
You
yeah.
had a comfort level that you could talk about it. So
Right, right.
it's no different.
Yeah, I think that's it. That's it. You don't. It's almost like there's a permission to talk about the subject now because he brought it up. We could talk about it, and now I know he struggles with some of those issues. We could talk about it, right? We've now opened that up.
Yeah.
We've opened that dialogue path up, and sometimes you need to be able, or you have to find ways to be able to open up those dialogue paths. And I imagine that part of the title of this book is a little bit about having the courage to have that conversation, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, the courageous ask comes from a couple different perspectives. Okay, the leader has to be willing to courageously ask themselves some difficult questions,
Yes.
um, and they have to have their own humility within themselves. Because sometimes we lose our identity and we think we really are that guy, that facade that we're,
Yeah.
but we really got to ask ourselves the difficult questions that bring us back to who we truly are. So that's one perspective. The other perspective is, how many times have we seen a leader fall? We've watched them fall. We've seen the struggles. We've watched them stumble. We've watched them fall. And then we look at back and go, wow, uh, I knew that was coming.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
watched it happen. I watched the whole thing. Well, okay, then the question is, I was on a board one time where we asked somebody hey, you're either going to get terminated or you need to move on. Okay. Um, and then we're all sitting around the table. We're going, we all saw it coming. In fact, when we hired this person, we saw some of these qualities.
Yeah.
Well, everybody individually had those thoughts,
Yeah.
but didn't share it. So
Yeah.
they didn't have the courage to share because they thought they were nuts. Everybody else thinks it's okay.
Yeah.
So the point is that people, whether it's the community or a board of directors or again a constituency or whatever, they have to have the courage to confront some of these things. I mean, don't you talk about this in your book, all in the same boat? You don't see a problem and just let it go.
Right.
You've
Right.
got to go after that problem.
Yeah.
You've got to move forward on that problem and not just let it go. Have the courage to challenge. I mean,
Yeah.
you talk about that a lot in your book. You
Yeah.
have to have the courage to challenge those things that you see. And anyway, that's where
Well,
the courageous ask, the title came from. Let's have courage and do it. Let's get out in front of it, because all that's going to happen in a fall is going to splash over all of us.
right. Right.
It's the board ends up with this problem in their lap. So how
Yeah.
about we get out in front of it and create an atmosphere that a leader can feel vulnerable. They can be open and honest. Um, a board can ask questions of what's going on in a personal life, especially in a Christian nonprofit. What's going on in the life of their leader?
Yeah.
Now, I'm not talking about you know, going too deep. I understand that it can become oppressive, but there is a role,
Yep.
and it could, because that's where most leadership falls happen, right? They happen on the personal side of life. It's
Right. Right.
sometimes it's financial, but financial usually comes back to a core individual personal issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why are we not probing it?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think, as you point out, I mean, in the book, I talk about fires on a submarine, right? We were
Mhm.
trained to run towards them and put them out
That's
quickly
right.
because everyone will die if a fire spreads on a submarine. But it's the same thing with problems in our business, right? Problems with a leader. If you don't address it early on, it could create, catastrophic consequences to the organization, right? The reputation of the organization,
Oh,
um, the employees, the customers, the
everything.
clients,
Yeah,
everything. Yeah. So
yeah.
you've got to get that addressed early. So essentially, yeah, it's a very equivalent story to what I talk about in the book. Is it's a problem that needs to be addressed. So
But we
what
don't do
and we
it.
don't do it. Yeah, no. So you mentioned this, and I think it's really important. You said a lot of times when things happen, people recognize the signs. They're like, "Oh, I knew that was going to happen." Like, what are some of the signs that maybe a leader might be struggling or might be having some issues, and that might prompt you to ask deeper questions? What are some of those signs that people could look for?
Well, I'd say the biggest thing is, well, number one, you have to know your leader.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you don't know your leader and you haven't created relationship with your leader, and again, that doesn't mean you're in some formal position on a board of directors or something. You could be out in
Right.
the community, sitting out in a crowd.
Right.
But if you know your leader, you know how your leader got to where they are.
Mm.
One day you're delivered this moniker of leader, executive, director, CEO, whatever it is. Something got you there. Something, you've heard this said that, the helicopters don't drop people off on the mountain of success. They
Right.
just,
Right.
you got there somehow. So it's usually family. In a Christian nonprofit, it has to do with your spiritual, some kind of spiritual awakening or guidance, or something got you there. Okay. And it's usually those two things are the big things. So a reordering of priorities. When that organization becomes more important than those top two things, too many times leaders think, okay, I've got this modicum of success. Okay, things
Mm.
seem to be doing well. And I'll just speak. Of course, people have figured out I speak from a Christian perspective. So um, just in that realm, um, uh, well, I lost my train of thought. So there's one of those flubs that you talk about, but so they've gotten there. So too many times, Christian nonprofit leaders think that just working there is their sustenance, is
Right.
their
Right.
spiritual sustenance. So they stop doing the things like going to Bible study, reading their Bible, praying, doing all these spiritual kind of things. So they don't need that anymore. So that's
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
big sign. And then family, too many times family, a leader thinks my family gets it. They understand my mission. They understand what I'm doing. They're part of it. But are they?
Yeah.
Sometimes they're not. So too many times the family becomes the blur in the peripheral vision of the leader that has a focus on the ministry. But it
Yeah.
did not
Yeah.
start that way. So they've shifted their priorities. They start to lose their personal identity. We talked about this a little bit earlier, is their identity becomes the organization
Yeah. Yeah.
instead of who they are that got them there. Their identity, they put on this facade, and all of a sudden in the beginning they realize, okay, they're just playing the game a little bit. They have to do these things to bring in money or whatever, to be successful. All of a sudden that becomes who they are. And like we talked about earlier, people ask you how you are, you hide behind the organization. The organization's doing great. We're this, we're that.
Yes.
No, no, no,
Yes.
no. Hold on
Yeah.
a second. I asked you how you are. I
Mm,
didn't
this
ask
is
you how the
this is
organization
important.
is.
Yeah. This is
Oh,
important.
so that creates a hollowness inside. Another one is taking credit for everything. I mean, come on. Usually, at least in the Christian nonprofit world, we're giving credit to God the whole way along, especially in the beginning. But all of a sudden, it starts to,
Yeah.
there's that little part in you that says, yeah, but if I wouldn't have answered the call, my name is on all the documents.
Yeah.
I raised most of the money.
Right.
And you don't say all these things, but it's just playing in your mind just that little bit. And it's just all these lies of the enemy just attacking you. All of a sudden, you know, you're taking credit for it.
Yeah.
And at least in your own mind. And that changes the way you talk to people. It changes the value you put on the employees and the staff and the volunteers. You start to not listen as much as you used to listen to them because you've got all the answers. You're the
Yeah.
man
Yeah.
or you're the woman now. So you become I've seen leaders who become addicted to the adrenaline that comes out when you're introducing a new program or a new piece of equipment or something,
Yeah. Yeah.
and like, once again, you're the man, but there is nothing to a nonprofit leader more exciting and adrenaline inducing than the eyes of a donor, that you can show them what you've done with their money and something new that's coming out.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
creates so much energy and excitement. So those are a couple things. It's funny you should ask me that question because my next article that's coming out that is for people that want to join my my blog newsletter is actually an article on what are some 5 indicators that show that a fall is possible with your leader or with yourself.
I really think this is what you talk about is really important. And I think what you hit really early on that was that you have to know your leader. So the people around you
Oh
have to
man.
know you to the point where they see something has changed, right?
Right.
I really like what you talked about in the book about your identity starting to shift from you yourself to sort of like you associated yourself with the organization. It became everything. And then, you talked about, you're careful of what you wore. You're careful, like when you walked
Oh,
into a restaurant, I had to look to see if there's a potential donor in here.
having that
I don't
done,
want to play.
we've
Yeah, I
all
don't want to
done
play
it.
golf because people think I'm using their money to play golf. And so it was affecting like everything in your life. Like you were monitoring everything so carefully. Your life became the company. Your life became the organization, right?
Oh yeah, one of the things, my wife and I, it was a big struggle. I've been married 35 years now, but at a certain point in the organization, of course, I was building something from nothing.
Right, right.
So I'm very sensitive to everything.
Yeah,
So I always had to sit with my face towards the door in a restaurant,
yeah,
and I spent the whole time just looking over her shoulder.
yeah, yeah,
Whose hand do I need to shake? Who do I need to just go by and mention some little fact about their football team or their baseball team or something they enjoy?
yeah, yeah,
Who there's somebody in this restaurant I know, and
yeah,
you want to know something, and it goes back to my indicators. That's an indicator right there. All of a sudden, everybody else in the restaurant was more important than my wife sitting right in front of me. And
yeah,
so she started to feel alienated. And that's where you want to talk about loneliness. Sometimes we're setting ourselves up for that. So
yeah, yeah.
this is a perfect example.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Hopefully listeners, you're hearing that and recognizing some of those signs yourself. Are you doing that? Are you becoming the company? Are you becoming the organization? Are you changing? And are you isolating yourself because of that? Right? Are your actions isolating you from your family or your normal support group? Right? And that's a warning sign right there that there's something wrong.
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, because it was the first, I've founded businesses before, but it was the first nonprofit that I founded. And in the beginning, I was a little uncomfortable with being the face of our organization. I didn't, honestly, right when I started, I just did not want it to be all about me. And it's the same with the book.
Right.
The book, I interviewed tons of people for the book because I didn't want just my perspective. So I get to this position where they're saying, but Brian, the organization needs a face. Okay. You
Mm,
have got to
yeah,
represent the organization.
yeah,
You have got to be the face of the organization. The problem, where the problem happened was, yes, I was the face of the organization, but then the organization became my face.
yeah,
If you're
yes.
catching that flip
I
there.
do. Yeah, no,
And
100%. Yeah,
that's where the problem started to occur. I lost who I was, what got me there, those
yeah,
foundational principles and things that made me who I was and could, get this organization rolling.
yeah, that's really powerful. Yeah. So there's a great way to say, are you becoming the company? And if you are, how do you? Those could be warning signs that you need to, you need someone to talk to. You need to
Yeah,
be able to
well,
open up to somebody.
John,
Yeah.
one of the difficulties is, what does the community expect?
Yeah.
They expect you to be the company.
Right.
They
Right.
expect you to be the nonprofit organization.
Yeah.
That is the expectation, and that is a problem.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's part of the conversation that I'm trying to start with the book and all these things. That's not okay.
Yeah.
That
You're talking about something that's really important, is that leaders are human.
oh,
We will fail, we will do things wrong, we are struggling with things, but in a lot of cases we're not allowed to, right? We
fact.
there's It's too important. Our role, especially in a fledgling organization, our role is too important for us to have problems, right? I remember this happened this
Don't
summer.
be real.
Yeah, right. Don't be real. Don't be
Be
really
real.
real. Be genuine, but don't be real. But yeah, so one of the things I do every time my employee has a birthday, I bring a card in for their birthday, and usually we bring some food in, and so I always celebrate my employees' birthdays. Always, always have done that, and so I have them on my calendar. I never forget them, and uh, and then my birthday came around this summer, and I went to work. I went to work and nobody mentioned my birthday. I went through the whole day and I went home. And I was driving home. I'm like, why is this bothering me? Why is it bothering that nobody even noticed it was my birthday? And it was like, it was almost like no, it was bothering me, like, because like that's, I do so much for others, and I was really surprised no one did anything for me. And it's just a weird feeling that like I guess I'm not allowed to have feelings like that. Like, you all forgot my birthday, it's not a big deal. I'm the boss. We're gonna keep moving forward. But it did feel weird, driving home that
Hey,
night. So
John, that's what you're supposed to do.
right, right.
You're supposed to remember my birthday.
Right, right, exactly. But no one remembered mine. It's a minor thing, but I just remember thinking, oh, that kind of sucks.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
we're
but
not supposed to be human.
it's
Yeah,
one of those things that us leaders, we internalize. We pull that back.
yeah,
And you
yeah.
didn't go in the next day and say, "Hey, what's everybody's problem around here?"
Right, right. Never, no, not a word. Not a
You
word.
can't
I
do
didn't say
that.
a word. Yeah.
And that's one of those things that we internalize that feeds into that lonely kind of, wow, I really am just kind of a job description, aren't I?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or you're the company. You're infallible. You're bulletproof. Nothing can harm you. And it's like,
Right.
not
Oh
true.
yeah.
Not
Yeah.
true at all. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. You're exactly right. The humanness. In fact,
yeah.
I mentioned that in my introduction to the book. My book is really about humanness,
Mm,
just allowing each other, even a leader looking at their board,
yeah, yeah.
as far as nonprofits go, a CEO has to look at their board and realize, you know what, they're human. It's
Right,
it's
right.
not just them to me. We're all leaders. I happen to be the executive. They happen to be the board, but I got to look at them as human as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it really goes both ways. So
Yeah, I like that. And one of the things that I really think, that I stress in my writings and my talking and my real life as a leader is, I think a lot of this stuff goes away if we get to know people really deeply. I think if I get to know my people, I know their struggles, I know their issues. If they get to know me, they know my struggles, they know my issues. I think one of the things that I learned as a submariner was we spent hours and hours and hours together in cramped spaces, months on end, and we knew every single detail about each other. So I could just notice a sailor come into a duty station, and I could just tell by his demeanor what was wrong, right? Because I knew my sailors that well because we spent so much time together. And I think that that's part of being a great leader, but also supporting the leader of the organization is having that relationship, good relationships, such that you can see when something's wrong. You can see those warning signs. You can tell when something has shifted and moved. And I think it's really important as a leader, but it's also important that the leaders have someone in their life that's also can monitor that kind of change that could possibly be happening.
Mhm. Oh, there's no question. That goes back to my comment earlier about being fully known. It's funny because I interviewed maybe a couple of pastors also as nonprofit Christian leaders, and one example was this pastor told me, how his separation is from his congregation. He doesn't always necessarily like that because it does make him lonely.
Mm.
But he gave this example of somebody is having a 4th of July picnic, and they're not going to, they don't invite him. They talk about it. They talk about
Yeah.
this picnic that's
Yeah.
coming up at their house, but they don't invite him and his family. And he says, nobody wants a preacher at their picnic. He said that changes the conversations that you can have at the picnic.
Oh, yeah.
I
True.
mean,
Yeah.
and doesn't
Yeah.
that happen even corporately? I
Yeah.
mean, really, so, a staff wants to go out and they really want to let loose on some evening, and
Oh,
they meet
yeah. Yeah.
at a bar or wherever they really want to let loose. They're not always bringing the boss along, because that might affect the impression that the boss has of them in their job.
Yes.
So that leaves the executive out, and
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. No. So yeah, I always talk about the power of your presence as a leader. Your presence changes things. When you walk into a room, things
yeah,
change, right?
uh-huh,
The boss is here now, so you're not just one of the guys. You are the boss, and things change when you're in the room. Same thing if you're the pastor or if you're the head of a nonprofit. You you represent something different. It's a different social dynamic than just, oh, he's,
yeah.
that's John, right? That's Brian. No, that's the head of the organization. Let me introduce you, or that's the head of the organization. I've got a question for you, or something like that. Things shift, and when you walk into a room as a leader.
I remember there were times where I would be in the hierarchy with people that were above me, and honestly, that's all I knew them as in their corporate
Right.
position. So you go out on a social thing, and and you're sitting there. That's all you know about them is their business. So you're talking business. And I've actually, it's probably happened 2 or 3 times where I just had people go, "Can we just not talk about business?
Mm,
can we
yeah.
can we talk about something else? Can we
Right.
keep moving?"
Right.
And and because they want to be known, they want people to know them as a leader, as a person, not just in their corporate position. And I think it's interesting when when we go to hire somebody, say a board is going to hire a new executive. They get their resume, they pull that resume out, and they're going, huh, okay, this looks like, we'll pick 5 of these resumes, 10 of these resumes, and we'll bring them in for interviews. Well, why do you bring people in for interviews?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the way we do things. I get it, I understand, but what's the purpose? The purpose is to see, you want to see examples um, of them exemplifying what is on the resume. You want to see that their knowledge matches up with what's on there, but you also are measuring their character, aren't you?
Yeah.
You're measuring, can this person create a culture in our organization, the one that we desire, and the one that already exists. You're measuring personal traits, like how articulate are they, because
Mm,
you're looking at a piece of paper.
right.
That's just a piece of paper. That's not
Right.
personality or anything. But what happens is you hire that nonprofit executive, and all that goes away.
Yes.
All of a sudden, you don't care about them as a person. You're looking at the job description. You do care, so don't misunderstand. I
Right.
don't make
Right.
it
Well,
too callous, but you
you
stop
forget.
asking some of the same questions you asked in the
Yeah.
interview,
Yeah.
and that's the end of it. So I think that's a problem, and boards are so scared to ask personal questions that they could glean an early um, a possibility of a fall happening, because they're so scared to ask those personal questions. Well, in your interview, you asked a lot of personal questions.
Right.
So
Right.
why did that go away?
Yeah.
So I think that's a
Interesting.
problem. I think it's something that we need to talk about. You cannot be afraid to go into some of the sticky stuff.
Yeah.
And boards and accountability structures in general are afraid to go into the sticky stuff. Hey, they got their own life going on. I mean,
Right.
they're
Right.
human too. So, but we got to start these conversations.
Yeah. I agree. This is really good. So, how can people find out more about this new book, your website, your writings? Where can people go?
Well, the book comes out on the 23rd. It's
Okay.
23rd of September. And so it's not quite out, but there's pre-orders. So you can buy that anywhere you buy books electronically, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, on down the line. But my website is briankreeger.com, BrianKreeger.com. And I'm always open to an email, brian@briankreeger.com.
Okay, that sounds good. We'll put links to these in the show notes so people can find it. I think you've covered something that's really, really important that we don't talk about enough, and
That's
that is the challenge that leaders face, and then how to, for the stakeholders in the organization, how to make sure that that you don't have a fall, that you don't have a leader that that basically struggles and causes a problems. How do you find out early on? How do you put out that fire early on? That's a really important issue.
Yep. Instead of just waiting for it to happen, watching it happen. Many times we're
Right,
watching it happen.
right.
But yeah, thank you so much, John. Yeah, it's been a great conversation. I love talking about this stuff.
Yeah, this is great. Very important book, and I encourage everyone to take a look at it. It's called Courageous Ask, and it's available where any books are sold. We'll have links to that in the show notes. Brian, thank you for being on the show and sharing all of your ideas, all of your experiences, and all of your insight on this topic.
All right, John, thank you so much. This has been such an honor. Yeah, it's been fabulous. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.